You got curly hair, you want straight hair. You got straight hair, you want curly hair. You got a Fleetside truck, you want a Stepside. You got a Stepside truck, you're going to want a Fleetside truck. So we've got Tony's 68 Chevy pickup in here. You've seen this on a lot of different videos. If you haven't, make sure that you subscribe to our channel and check out all the different videos we've got on this and all the videos we got coming up. I'm going to be putting a Fleetside on here. We're going to build the box from scratch, so you're going to be able to see how to do it from the first step all the way to the end. You make sure you stay tuned. Yeah. So taking the bed off isn't that big of a deal generally. You can see the bolts right on the top. You just climb underneath and get some oil on them and unbolt them. Sometimes you're going to have to cut them off, what have you. You're going to want to take off your rear bumper. I like to take off my rear wheels so that I don't have to lift the bed up over it. And no matter how much stuff you take off, there's always going to be one or two things still hanging on. You might have a zip tie. You might have a ground strap. I had my exhaust that was on this here with a support. So just take your time and then just do a little bit of a trial fit and see if everything's working good. Make sure you have enough people helping you out on this, because we don't want to do any damage to this bed, because we're going to be able to sell it to somebody else. I got some help, and we're going to take this off now, and then I'll show you what's underneath. Okay, now we're ready to rock. All right. Whew. See, for all my talking and all my doing, I forgot to take these off right here. So, excellent case in point. No matter how much you get, there's always something else hanging on there. So just be gentle when you're bringing it up. All right, so first I like to get everything out of the box, make sure that I have everything so I'm not halfway through my assembly finding something missing. I know that I've got everything. Now what I'm going to do is make myself a platform in order to build the bed on. You don't have to do this. You can do it on the frame. But if the cab is on there, it makes it very difficult to do, because you can't get to the front panel bolts really well. So I like to do it on a separate platform unless I have the cab off the frame. Every time I've done it on the frame with the cab, I've damaged the cab. So this is going to be the easiest way. Now what I do when I build this is I'm using measurements as far as I can't have my 2x4s right here go too wide, so they're just a couple of inches short on either side, so I can put my bedsides on and get easy access. You'll notice that the width of the wood right here is about 32 inches from center to center, and that's because that's the same thing as the bolts here on the frame, or at least some of them where they line up. And then this right here, I've got the 2x4 extending over a couple of inches. The reason being is that you'll notice that this bracket right here, it's got a hangover, and this is going to go on like this. So I have to be able to have the 2x4 extend over for this little step right here to be there. So that's why we build this platform in this shape and everything. It's not too expensive. I think it ran me about 60 bucks in total. So I've got my platform built. Now I'll go ahead and take my sills and I'll get them in the right position as close as possible using my measurements from my frame. And then I can go ahead and start putting other pieces on. Let me get this set up a little bit more, and then I'll show you what comes next. In order to get my sills in the right spot, the bars that go across, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put my rear sill on, drill the hole through the 2x4 and bolt this on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my frame and I'm going to take my tape measure. I'll put it in the center of the hole where the rear sill bolts to, and then every place where the sill goes, I'll go ahead and mark where that is. I'll come over and then I'll simply transfer it onto my 2x4. Now I know that this goes right here and this goes right here, and I'll get my other sill plet set up in here, and then we're starting to make a bed. All right, so I just got this basically set up because I want to make a couple of points from long bed to short bed and a few miscellaneous things. Now we've got our sills that are going to be bolted into the frame down, but there are some floaters that are a little bit skinnier, see here? And in order to get this in the right spot, what I do is simply put the tub on here and put a couple of bolts in it, and then I know exactly where this floater goes right here. Now if you've got a long bed, then you'll have a floater on the back also because it's a little bit longer, obviously. Now if you're doing a steel floor bed, you don't have to worry about any of this because it's already done and you can just go ahead and start putting your bedsides on. I'll be caught up with you on that in just a minute, but if you're doing a bedwood kit, you got to go through these steps right here. Okay, now I'm almost ready to put my bedsides on, but I want to say a few last things about the sills here. Now I've only bolted it down in the front and in the back. I don't need to do the ones in the center because it'll make it easier to line up with the holes in the bedsides. I do have to have it bolted down though, because once I put the weight of the bedside on, the whole thing will want to fall on over. So be sure that it is bolted down. Another thing that you're going to have to check for, now in this truck we installed an LS engine and it's got the tank in the back with a high pressure fuel pump and everything, and I had to make clearance for those fuel lines and all. Now you might have something similar or exhaust or whatever, so make sure you check all your clearances on your sills before you install it because it's a lot more difficult to cut that out after the fact. Now one last thing here is these plates on the bottom. Now it just comes taped onto the sill so it's easy to find when you unwrap everything. And what you're going to do is just place it right here. I like to weld these on. You don't necessarily have to, because if you're going to be putting the bolt through the wood and the sill and the plate into the frame, then they're not going to go anywhere. But again, I like to weld them on. I just find it a little bit easier and a little nicer. So now I'm getting ready to put my bedside on. Let me find some help and we'll get this set up. Okay, our bedside is on and it's looking good. Now, a couple of things I like to do before I put my bedside on is double check things like any sharp edges. I'll run my fingers along it and sand down anything that's snagging me. Sometimes on your spot welds, they'll be jagged also, so I like to double check those. On the edge at the very bottom, we've got to make sure that these are sanded down a little bit on the edge and the edge is nice and flat. It can't be tucked down because it might carve into your wood. Now the next thing you're going to be doing is making sure that the pocket on the bedside right here is going to fit onto the sill. If this edge right here is tucked in too far, then it's going to make it very difficult to impossible. So I'll take this edge right here and I'll go ahead and I'll bend it out just a little bit, not much, and that'll make it easier to set onto the sill. I'll take the sill and I'll make sure that it's tucked in a little bit too. If it's flared out, it's going to be really tough. When I'm putting the bedside on, I'm going to go nice and even. It can't be cocked. If it's like this, or if the person's ahead of you or behind of you in the front, then it's not going to fit onto this little pocket. It's got to be nice and even. When I'm putting it on, I'm going to be starting in this corner, as it were. I'll just get it set here, and then I'll slowly bring it down, and then I'll slowly bring it in. If you try to put on too much, then what can happen is you can scratch beyond the edge of where the sill, the bedside's going to fit, and then it's going to have all these ugly scratches right here. So just set it on the edge, then bring it down, and then scooch it up until the holes line up, and you'll be good to go. Okay, now if you're building a bedwood that has the metal in it, you don't have to worry about this next step. But if you're doing wood, you're going to want to pay attention to this right here. Notice in the back, you've got this little gap right here, and that's where the bedwood's going to go in the back here. But in the front, it doesn't have that. So what we need to do is just get an old piece of wood, lift up the bed, and put it up underneath here. I'm just going to lightly tighten this bolt here. I still need some movement because I need to be able to pull this back and forward in order to put my front panel on. The wood you're going to use is going to be about 3/4 of an inch thick because that's about the same thickness as the bedwood kit you're going to be installing. So I'm going to go ahead and get my front panel, double check it all, and then I'll show you how to slide it up on in here. So a few things on installing your front panel. Of course, you're going to run your hands over all of your edges and make sure that they're nice and such and such. On the back of the panel, there are cage nuts, or nuts that are welded in this little pocket right here where you're not going to be able to get your hands in. I like to get these bolts right here. Notice how it's a point on this. This makes it really easy to line up things when you're bolting it up. Now, if you want to put in something fancy, you can take these and line it up and then take it out and then put in something fancy after the fact. But chase the nuts through to make sure that they are working correctly. Once you get the panel up here and you're trying to get it in there, you may not know, well, is it because it's not lined up right, or is the nut got some sort of foreign matter in there that's giving me a problem? So if we do this first, we know we're all good to go. Now, when I'm going to be installing it, you need to notice this notch right here, and it is going to go right in between that notch right there. And in the top right here, you have to watch for this edge right here and make sure that it has enough clearance for the front bed panel. If it's real close, then when everything gets painted, it's going to scratch it right there. So we're going to go ahead and get this up and double check all that. So I've got my front bed panel just fastened at the top lightly so I can still move things around. And I've taken out this bolt right here so I can gently spread the bedside apart. I've got my front panel right in my slot there. And then I make sure that it's in my top, and I'll get my bolt in here. Now I can double check all of my other holes and make sure everything lines up and is looking good. I'll get a few more bolts in there. I'm not going to be tightening anything down really all that much because I still have to square everything up. So let me show you what that looks like. Now these holes are lining up really nice, but sometimes you have a little bit of trouble. So you get something like this or a Phillips head screwdriver and just simply stick it through the hole and help line things up. If you're going to have to enlarge a hole, don't just get a larger drill bit and drill the hole out larger. Only enlarge it just to the amount that you need to be able to put your bolt in. All right, now I've been doing this for a long time. Obviously I'm old, and I'm telling you that the quality of this sheet metal is just off the charts from what I used to have to work with in the past. You're still going to have to do a little bit of trimming in here and there just to get everything to fit perfect though. Case in point, I trimmed these right here, this edge was sticking down just a hair too far, and it was bumping up against this edge right here, and it wasn't allowing me to get my bolts into these holes exactly right. So I just did a little bit of trimming, and now we should be all good to go. So when we're putting the tub on, we have to make sure that this lip right here is underneath this lip right here, like this. And when I'm going to be installing the tub, I'm going to put a bolt in the top first. I'm going to use an awl or a Phillips head screwdriver to help line things up, and then I'll have a bolt in the top. That'll keep my tub from dancing around on me. I'll just get it lightly snugged up there, and then I can go ahead and get the rest of my bolts in. Now let's say, for instance, I get something that is off just a hair. Again, we're only going to enlarge the hole just enough to be able to get our bolt in. So I've got my tubs in, and if this was a metal bed, I'd be just about done right now. Tighten up some bolts, put it on, and we'd be rocking. But we're going to be putting a bed wood in this. Now I've already trial fitted the wood and the whole 9 yards on this. You can see that video right here on how to do your bed wood. But for this video, we're just concentrating on the bed assembly. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble this a little bit more, and I'll be back in just a bit, show you what comes next. All right. So I want you to notice something right here. See how you got a wide gap at this end, but a narrow gap at this end? What's happened is our bed isn't squared. It's a little bit cockeyed like that. So we're going to have to get it nice and even on both sides. How we're going to be doing that is just simply getting a tape measure, and we're going to go ahead and put it in one corner and measure to the outer corner right here. So here I'm getting about 102.5. On the other side, I'm getting almost 105 inches. So what that's telling me is this side right here has to come back a little bit. So I'll go ahead and bring this back, and then I'll do measurements again, And it's a really good idea to double check your square several times, because when you're tightening things up and you're moving it around and this and that and the other, it just somehow jostles out of shape. So constantly make sure that you're straight. Another thing that I'll do is I'll measure my tailgate. Now the tailgate is 66 3/4 of an inch thick, wide. And in order to make sure that I've got enough right here, I've got to make sure that I've got about 1/8 of an inch on either side. So here I've got 67 inches, and so that is giving me 1/8 of an inch on either side. You might want a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on how tight you're making your tolerances. But now that I've got this pretty set up, I'll go ahead and double check my wood. I'll use a little spatula like this, and I'll make sure that my gaps are all the same. You really want to take your time right here, because this is a show piece, and so making sure that all your lines are nice and even, that everything's even up against the wood here in the front panel and all that, is really going to take your truck and make it next level, if you will. So give me some time on this. I'll be back in just a bit. When I've got my wood in and I'm satisfactory with all of my gaps and everything, I'm going to go ahead and start installing the bolts that come with my kit. Now you're going to be getting two different bolts with that. You're going to be getting this thicker one that is a 5/16, and then this smaller one here that is a 1/4 20. Now your 1/4 20s, they're going to go in your strips, and then your 5/16 are going to go along your edge of your bedsides and your tubs. Now I'll go ahead and I'll set them all in there, and then I'm going to need to get my bolts underneath, my nuts underneath. You can do this two different ways. You can just go ahead and get some tape, lay it down on top of the bolts so that when you're putting the nuts on the bottom, they don't push up, or you just have a buddy hold them down for you when you're on there. Now when it comes to those, you've got two different washers right here. This one here you can see has a narrower hole for the 1/4 20 bolt, and this has the larger hole for the 5/16. These are going to be going, the 5/16, along the edge of your tub and your bedsides, and then these are only going to be used where you don't have a sill plate. So you got a sill plate here, you got one here, but there isn't one right here. So this is going to go ahead and span the gap of the wood and get that nice and secure there. Now the kit comes with lock washers and nuts, just regular lock washers and nuts, because that's what was original. So that's what we send you. I prefer though to use this right here, which is known as a flange nut. And the nice thing about this is that you can see these serrations in here, and that basically is a lock washer, if you will, and it's like a washer. So you get a nut, a washer, and a lock washer all in one shot. The reason that this is nice is because when you're up underneath there and you're trying to get this on the sill plate, you're going to have to balance the nut, the washer, and in certain places the lock washer, and then the regular washer. So it's a bit difficult to dance all that stuff together. Now if you're going to be using the original, all you need to do is just go ahead and get a socket, and what you'll do is you'll just put tape or something inside so that the nut will sit up on top like this, and then you'll just get a little bit of tape and you'll wrap it around the edge right here just a little bit, and so your nut and your lock washer will sit up there like that, and that'll make it easier to install. But again, your flange nuts are going to be a lot easier, because since it has this washer, if you will, on there, it'll just sit like that and make installing a lot easier. Now you can see this is a lot easier to do if we've got this on sawhorses and off the truck. If it was on the truck, we'd have to deal with mufflers, drive shaft, frames, all that kind of stuff. A lot easier. When I'm tightening up the bolts, I'm starting in my center, I'm making sure my gaps are good, and I'm only going to be tightening up these centers right here, the strips all the way up to the front. I'm going to put my washers and my nuts on my bedsides, on these strips here, and on my tubs, but I am not going to tighten them up. We want to be able to get our tailgate on and take these ends and manipulate them a little bit so we get a really nice line right here. We're going to, it's pretty heavy if the tailgate's on when we put it on the truck, so we're going to leave it off for right now. Now we'll go ahead and put it on the frame, then we can put our tailgate on, then we can get this all nice and straight, and then we can go ahead and tighten up these bolts that are easier to get to. So let me get that set up and we'll see how good it looks in just a second. Just like when you took your bed off, when you put your bed on, you might run into trouble. So make sure that your stand is still ready and you can put your bed back on in case that is the problem. Now, things you might run into is your exhaust, your hangers, your electrical wires, fuel lines, different things like that. And all this is exposed now, so make sure you're getting all your zip ties, make sure everything's comfortable and not jammed up, and you've got a lot of room to work with. Now we're going to put it on, and we're going to be using these little rubber isolators or bed mount pads. They're just going to go exactly where the sills mount. And we're all ready, so we're going to get this on and look good in 2 seconds. Stay tuned. Now it's time to bolt our bed down. You got a couple of different ways you do this. If it is a metal bed, then in the floor of the bed, it'll have little square holes like that. And that is for your carriage bolt to go through. You'll notice at the top right here, at the bottom of this little hump, it's got a squared edge in there. And if you put that through your metal bed, then it won't rotate. You'll be able to tighten your bolts at the bottom. If you've got a bed wood, then you're going to need this cam washer right here that also has the square hole in it, and then you're going to go ahead and put it in your bed like this. Now you'll notice that this hole right here that's recessed, it's off center, and that is so that when this drops in, it'll spin and it'll lock in place, and you'll be able to tighten it down on the bottom. Now I want you to notice I don't have any bed holes in this at all. I like a nice smooth look. I think it's cleaner. How I achieve that is I'll take the plate that welds onto the bottom of the sill plate, and I'll take a nut and I'll weld that on there. Then I'll go ahead and I'll weld the sill plate on a little extra stronger because it's going to be taking all the support of the bed, and then I'll be able to simply put it on and put my bolt with a large washer and a lock washer through the frame and bolt that up, and I get a nice smooth look. So now I'm going to put my tailgate on, and what we're going to be doing is putting our hinge on the bottom, and then we're going to be putting our brace at the top. When we're putting these on, they're slotted, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to move them all the way out, and the reason that we're doing that is when we put our tailgate on, we want to not bang into our paint into anything. So we'll start it with it all the way out, then when we get our tailgate on, we can position these exactly where we want them after. So I'm going to use a little grease. I'm going to get it on my pivot points. I'm going to put some in the tailgate pocket too, and then I'm going to make sure that I got all my nuts and bolts and tools all set up to go. Now what's going to happen is I have to have everything off of this side. The tailgate's going to go onto that pivot, and then we're going to go ahead and slide this down like this and go ahead and bolt it on. That's why you need your tape right here. If this little rubber stop right here is on right here, you're going to need to take that off, otherwise you're not going to be able to slide this down, and just have all your nuts and bolts ready so you're ready to rock. Tailgate's a little heavy. Okay, so yeah. Get your top nut started first. Now these also have slots in them, so we're going to be pulling this all the way out so we don't bang into our paint right here. After we get the tailgate all latched and everything, then we can go ahead and adjust our position in order to have it flush with the outside here. Okay, with that on, hold on to that. Now you can take your arms here and put them on. And again, I'm pulling them all the way forward. Just a light snug. And light snug. Now, you see this slot right here? That slot is going to line up with a pin that's sticking in here. what you're going to do is you're going to bend this upwards in this shape right here, and then all you have to do is line up your slot with a pin, and then you're all ready to go. I'll do the same thing with the other side, and then I'll go ahead and get my tailgate up, and I'll position it and get my lines nice right here. I like to use a stir stick. It helps line things up because it just makes it easier to see. So I'll just go ahead and place it like this, and then of course our brackets at the top and the bottom, they are adjustable. I'll go ahead and move them out and in as I need, and then this line right here, I'll simply put in the stir stick, and I can see that this is nice and even all the way too. And this is why I've had to leave all the bolts on the ends loose, so that all this can be moved to get in the perfect position. Now we can go ahead and tighten it up. Now you might be asking yourself, well Dave, how did you put your tailgate together? I've got a separate video for you right here for that. Alright, so after everything's tightened down here, there's two little last pieces that go. There's a rod that goes from here to a sill plate. I just misplaced mine for the moment. And there's a splash guard that goes in the back. Now you can't install this until everything else is tight, so you'll be doing this piece last. So if you got curly hair and you want straight hair, you can. If you don't have the truck you want, you can. We've taken this Stepside and turned it into a Fleetside with not that much time. Everything bolted together really nice with just minimal trimming on there. I've got a few more things to finish off, hooking up my exhaust, my electric, putting my lights on, deciding if I'm going to go with a roll pan or a bumper, but I'm not going to bore you with all that stuff. I do want you to check us out on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe to the YouTube channel, because I am breaking my back here every single week to get your truck back on the road. See you next Tuesday, man.